Hello to all my clay friends. So today we are going to make one of these textured bowls with the MKM roller. So what are we going to do? We are going to start with a 3-pound ball of clay, and I'm going to throw it into a cylinder, and we're going to make it into the bowl after we put this texture on. And then as bonus, we're going to take that bowl. Here's an example of it, how it looks untrimmed, and we're going to trim it, boom, and put a foot on. And I'll talk to you about how I locate the foot or figure out where I want to put the foot on these bowls. I'm also going to talk about the bat system that I use when I make bowls like this. Okay, so let's show you what's going on. So let me clear this stuff off. So what are we going to do? Let's just go over the bat system first. So I use, for these kind of things, I use this bat system made by Hydrobat, and it comes with this adapter, which is for when you want to use bats that are less than 10 inches wide, 10 inches or smaller, because here these bat pins are 10 inches apart. So if you're using smaller bats, you need something to help hold your bats on, some sort of adapter. So if you look at this great adapter that Hydrobat sells, that this is the 10-inch bat pins, and I think these bat pins are at 6 inches apart, so that will fit this 10-inch bat. You see that? And so what I love about these Hydrobats is that they're made out of plaster and that they absorb water out of the clay, and I don't have to wire my pots off, so that the bottoms dry pretty quickly as after I throw, and so the rims dry just because they're exposed to air, but the plaster is constantly absorbing the water out of the bottom of my bowls. And since it dries out the bottom of my bowl pretty fast, faster than if they were made on a plastic bat, that when these pots are ready to trim, they just pop off. So I know I never have to wire these off. I love these. And the reason why I like plaster so much is because I learned on how to throw with plaster bats when I was an undergrad. So here, I'll put this one on. There we go, like that. And then I'll put this guy on here, like that. So these two, oh, the other thing I like about these Hydrobats is they have rubber grommets here. So the pins here fit into these little rubber things, and it keeps it from damaging the bat. So here we go, like that, it goes on. So now I'm ready to use the thing. So I have my 3-pound ball of clay. So what makes throwing on plaster a little bit different is that I know that when we throw on masonite bats or even plastic bats, you wet the bat down just a little bit. For this, you actually got to wet the clay down a lot, so that I really can add some water to this before I throw. So I usually do a cleanup thing here where I clean this off just a little bit all the way around. And now I am going to wet this guy here. Here we go. And then I'm going to slap it down. So I can really add a ton of water to this because this plaster bat really absorbs water really fast. So there, push it down. So that piece of clay is now getting stuck, because what is happening is all that water is getting sucked into the plaster and help pulling the clay and sucking it down to the bat. So that's what makes these really good. So now I'm going to work on, I'm going to center this guy up. So here, I'm going to wet it down and just work on centering. So here, and the centering works just the same as any old other time when you're centering here. So go up. Yeah, and then back down. There we go. So it's getting pretty close to being centered, and I'll go back up again. Here we go. So remember, this was a 3-pound ball of clay, and I go back down again. There we go. There. So that's looking pretty centered. Let me go up and down maybe one more time just to make sure we got it looking pretty good. So one more time, wet my hand down, up and down, go up, and then back down. There we go. So this is feeling pretty good. So now that I have it centered, I have to think about the kind of bowl that I want to make. How wide do I need it to be? So right now, if I just open this up, this is going to be a really narrow cylinder. Actually, I want my cylinder probably about that wide when I throw it, when I make it. So I want this blob, I have to widen my centered mount out that far before I start my opening. So I'm going to push this down, and while I'm pushing down, with this hand, I'm going to be pushing in down here. And what I want to make sure that happens is the higher part of the clay doesn't fold over down onto my bat. So here, I'm going to hold this here, and I'll actually put pressure here from the side as I go down, right? So you can see this happens a lot. You see how this part of the clay here is wider than this part of the clay down here. And I call that mushrooming, where that part of the clay, if I keep just pushing down, this wider part may fold over and come down and trap a bead of air or a bead of water inside of this against the back, and that'll cause a weak spot. And that place then can create a circular crack going around, or a semicircular crack on your pot. So I need to make sure that this part here doesn't touch the bat before this. So I really want this part to scoot out. I do not want this part here to fold down. So let me pull the camera back again. So the trick is with that is I got to add this side pressure to it as I'm throwing. So let's come around this way. You can see it more from the front view here. I got to add some side pressure here as I'm throwing. So here I'm pushing down and I'm adding a lot of side pressure here to keep that from folding over. And I'm using a lot of pressure right here. And I'm also maybe using some of this pressure here, and I'm pushing down with that part of my thumb. Here we go. So you see how this finger here is running along the edge, trying to keep this part from folding down first. Here we go. Push, 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 push. Push, 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 push. There we go. So you see how that just got wider. So is that wide enough? That's getting pretty close to wide enough. I'm pretty excited about that. So let me push it down just a little bit more, and then I think we'll be good. So here, let's push down just a little bit more. There we go. Oh, I think we're good. I think we're in good shape. So this-ish will be my cylinder, how wide my cylinder is when I throw this, okay? So let's bring this camera back around so that you guys could see it from the action from the side here. Here we go. So now I'm going to do a widening pass on this to make this clay blob a little wider, and open it. Sorry. Now I'm going to do my opening. So I use my fingers here, put them in the middle. We'll do it this way, I guess. So here, going down and opening. Let's get a good view of that here. So there. Let's go down and open here. So push down, opening, 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 opening. There. So I normally do two hands like that, but if I do that, you guys can't see very well. So let's check the thickness of the bottom, right? Needle tool, stabby, stabby down to the bottom. So that's about the thickness that I want. Maybe for this kind of bowl, I'd normally want it a little bit thicker than my pinky. So I'm thinking that's pretty good. So let's clean that up. And so now let's widen. So when I widen, I curl my hand over like that and I pull straight back toward myself. Okay, so here, widening. So I get this, sometimes this little wave of clay here. So if you look closely, this little chunk of clay can end up folding over, just like how we were having mushrooming before. This can end up folding over and trapping this wet water in here. So what I do with that is then I will take this sponge here and push this down and marry that piece of clay back in, because I don't want that piece of clay coming off. So I marry that piece of clay back down, dip my hands back in the water, and I'll keep opening. So this is a flat bottom bowl. So I'm opening this up flat. I just want this area to be flat here as I open. I'm gonna push this back down again. There, and I'll open it up a little bit more. There we go. So now I'm gonna stop for a second and just work this flat area to make sure it looks good. So here, I'm gonna flatten out that bottom like that. There we go. Flatten out that bottom like that. I just maybe do that 2 or 3. It's not really compression. I don't really consider this compressing. I'll come back and compress it later. I'm just kind of making that a little neater in there. Okay. So now I'm going to finish my widening pass here and just widen it, just finish widening it. So that's feeling about right. And now I'll come back and clean up this part here. There we go. So I just want this smooth and flat. I don't care about the compressing too much right now, because as I raise and as I stretch the walls later, I will do a lot of compressing then. There, so I just want that part to be kind of flat. Okay, so now I'm going to start raising the walls. Okay, so this cylinder, when I make bowls, any other kind of bowls just about, I always make the cylinder or make the bowl so that it's flaring outward already. But for these kinds, when I know I'm going to use the roller, I'm going to throw it straight up and down, because that just allows me a better surface to use these rollers on right here, right? So we'll get to those in a second. So we're going to texturize after we make this cylinder a little bit taller. There we go. So the first raise like that is usually pretty gentle, and what I'm trying to do is even out the cylinder. So I'm always trying to make an even cylinder. So here I'm always going to check on the inside to make sure that the inside and outside have the same thickness all the way down. So you see how flat, 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 and it makes a fairly 90-degree angle and goes straight up and down. And if you look from the inside and outside, it's staying about the same thickness all the way down. That's what I want to see. So now I'll come back and I'll do another raising here. So you can see here that inside is pushing out, outside is pushing in, outside hand is lower. Okay, so here I'm going to push, and then do go up. Here we go. There, so you see that I got taller here. So once again, I want even thickness. So I want even thickness all the way down. If it was thicker at the bottom, I would have squeezed a lot harder at the bottom, okay? But it seems pretty good, and it's still straight up and down, right? But I want an even thickness from here all the way down to there. So let's do it again. So let me wet this whole thing down one more time. Let me round this top off, because a lot of times the top doesn't stay round. It gets a little bit goofy looking, so I'll just sometimes bend my finger like that and just kind of bend my finger over the top like this to kind of help push that, make that more round. Let's get you guys in a, whoa, crazy angle. Okay, so here, now I'll just try to bend this finger over, and I'll push this finger down like that, just to kind of smooth out, straighten out that business, that rim on top. We don't want that rim to get too crazy. All right, so now let's do a little bit more throwing here. So raising, I mean, so I'll wet the outside, wet the inside, and I'll push from both sides. I lock my hands together. See how my hands are touching right here like that, so that they can work together as they go up. That's very important for all of your raising when you raise. So here I push, and then go up like that. There we go. Looking really groovy. Look at that. Oh, getting much taller. Ooh, that's really nice. So let's look at the thickness again really fast. Let's just check, see how thick it is. Check the inside and outside. So you can see that that's looking pretty good right there. All the way down, same thickness from top to bottom. That's what we want all the way down. So let's go back and let's do maybe one more raise, and then we'll smooth it out and get the roller action going, get some texture put on there. All right, so I'll push in from the, I'm straightening out the rim again really fast. So I'm gonna push in from, I'll push out from the outside, out from the inside, push in from the outside. There we go. So there, we're getting a beautiful raise that time. Look at that, looking really good. Nice. Yeah. All right. So that is about what I want. So I want a cylinder that is way too tall for the bowl I want. I'm going to make a bowl that's probably about much shorter than this, right? All the way around. But what I want to do is I make this cylinder, and then I'm going to use the texture roller, and then I'll stretch it out. So I'll do this technique called stretching, where I take the cylinder and I push it out into shape. So I'm going to clean up the rim here just a little bit right now, because a lot of times this rim, I'm able to keep the rim the way it is. So I'll clean that rim up a little bit. Let's undercut this a little bit underneath here. And that becomes important later, but I always undercut these cylinders like that. And I'll talk to you about why I do that when I use the rollers. There, so I'm cleaning that up. That didn't come off so cleanly. Usually it does. Let's get back in there, clean it off. So I like cutting this off right now, and we'll talk about why that is here in a second. So there, and then I'm gonna use two ribs inside and out and clean off the surface. So here I have two ribs. I'll probably go this way like this. So this will be the outside one, this will be the inside one. They'll be parallel each other, and I'll scrape both sides of my cylinder going up like this. Going up, 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 up. I'm just scraping off all the slip, trying to erase my throwing lines. You see that? So erase, erase, and I'll do it again. Erase, 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 erase. Look at that, how beautiful that is. All that goopy stuff comes off, really nice. Do that one more time, maybe. Just make sure it's a nice, straight, happy cylinder. Okay, there we go. Look at that, how beautiful that is. Woohoo! So I'm very excited about that. So now I have my cylinder, it's ready to go. So let's use, I showed you quickly earlier, but you'll see that my rollers that I like to use, I have 3 already in the water. the rollers, these wooden rollers from MKM, like to be wet when they're being used on pottery. Why is that? Well, if you don't wet them down, they will stick to the pots if you use a dry wood. But wet wood is really kind of slimy and it won't stick to the side of the pot as I roll it up. So I'm going to use this roller right here, this big boy, right? And so the reason why I undercut this is because it allows me to get a good start for the roll, right? If you see that, and when I push it up against there, I don't have this extra piece of clay sticking out down here that interferes with me getting this up against the side of the pot to start my rolling up. Also, it allows me to get in there and really push pretty good as I roll up. It does a really good job. So I roll this here, I put that there, and then I push back from the inside. I'm not really pushing out from the inside. I'm mainly, as I push in from the outside, I just try to keep my inside hand from moving inward, right? So my inside hand is just providing resistance against the outside hand as it rolls up. All right, so let's do this. Let's roll this up. So I want to roll this up all the way around as I go up. So here we go. So I'm going to dip this one more time in the water because it sat there for so long. So now I push up and I roll, roll, roll. So I'm creating this beautiful pattern as it goes up. Right, so you see that? That's one roll, and I'll do it again here, right here. I like this particular pattern because it is nice and big and bold, and it shows up really good on a bigger bowl like this. I love these bigger rollers. They're just beautiful, right? And they make a few different kinds of rollers that work really good. There we go, there's another one. So you see how the pattern kind of links together, even though you can see, if you look carefully, where one roller was, second roller, but overall the pattern looks pretty good against each other. It doesn't look like a bunch of separate rollers going up and down. So that's why I like using this roller in particular. This is a really good one. And later on, I'll put the description or the number of this roller in the comment section because I don't have it right now handy. There, so I just keep rolling, and I make sure that the next roller covers up. There's a little bit of overlap in each pattern as I go around. Okay, I'm going to dip this in the water because it's starting to stick a little. Here we go again. And I roll up again. So you can see that it starts to beat up my bowl. So if you watched me make cups, this is very similar to the way I make cups. But then there's some other stuff, new stuff that we're going to do, and we'll talk about a little bit about form here after we get this done, like why I make my bowls the way I do. Okay, there we go. Go up again. So you can see that I want this whole texture to go all the way around the whole thing. Now there are other ways to use rollers, like some people roll it going horizontally, going this way around. I just never could get the hang of that. Also, I have a bunch of rollers that I made myself, but we don't have those out today. And those, I love using those as well, out of Bisqueware clay, right? So that will be another video where we'll just talk about how to make your own. That'll be a different video. Almost done. So a few more. So these take longer to do because you see how it just it's just a lot of surface I got to do. So I got to roll it up and down many, many times, right? But this is the last time. Woo! All right, we are there. All right, so now I have it textured all the way around, but many of you are probably worried, like, you know, what happened? You know, that beautiful cylinder looks kind of messy, right? It's not quite so happy anymore like it was before, right? But we're going to fix it because, like I said with my cups when we did the cup demo, that beautiful cylinder, that even cylinder is still in there somewhere. The bones of that cylinder are still here. And all we have to do is get it back into round. And there's a couple of ways we could do that. I'm going to do that with a rib. And then if it's really bad at the start, I just take my hands and use very steadily, just start to round it up. And you'll already see that it starts to round up. Hopefully, when you were rolling up, you were using a fairly even pressure each time so that the clay is getting messed up and warped a little bit and thinner, thicker, thinner, but it's happening all around the pot, all in the same way. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take my rib here and just start to stretch it out. So what do I mean by that? I am going to take this rib and start using it on the side and push outward. I do not get to touch the outside of this anymore. So let's bring this down and get this close so that you could see with both of these cameras what's going on. So there we go. Switch views to that. So now what I'm going to do is take this and just slowly push it out into the form that I want. Right, so I'm pushing out, pushing out, pushing out, pushing out, and I go all the way down to the bottom. And you'll see already that it's already starting to look more roundish. And each time I do this, it starts to look a little bit more round. So you can already see that it's already a little bit calmer. There's a little bit of a funky issue here, but this bowl has I have a long ways to stretch this out, because I left this purposely just a little bit thick here, all the way down than I would have normally. And so that allows me to have some strength and some thickness that I could stretch this out into a bowl that I think looks really good. So here we go. We'll keep stretching this out like that as we go down. There we go. And I'm using, so as I face the wheel, I push out at about my 3 o'clock right here, okay? And then I'm watching the outside here as I go, because a lot of times, when you make bowls, you're more focused on the inside, right? How the inside curve looks. But for these kind of bowls, I'm really focused on the outside. So you see how the bowl has really calmed down. The shape has really started to take a good form. So let's look at the form. So, because we could stop at any moment, and let's just talk about the different shapes you could make. Because I could actually just stop right here. And that's a pretty good bowl, right? It's pretty tall. It's pretty tall, right? As far as proportionally, I feel, for this kind of bowl. But I love this sort of what I call a barrel shaped bowl, where it kind of goes up and out a little bit, but then turns back in, and the widest point is like about halfway up. I love those kind of bowls. So if you look at the kind of bowl we're going to try to make this into, we're going to try to make it into this bowl here. So it has a little bit of barreliness, but it doesn't really go back in, right? So it kind of goes straight and then comes back down. So this is the kind of bowl that we're going to make today. So it just requires me to push it out more. So by pushing it out more, I am going to make the bowl shorter and more of that shape. So I'm going to push out all the way down, and a lot of this height is going to get converted into width. This bowl is going to come out and then up like that. So I'm going to keep pushing this bowl outward like this. And then one thing you'll also notice is that this pattern here begins to stretch out some as I push it outward. So let's keep pushing it outward. Here we go. So here, pushing out, and going down. I go all the way down. I go all the way down to the base here. And I'm really concerned about how this base transitions from here and how it transitions up. I want that transition to be really smooth when I push this out. So there we go. So I want this transition there to be super smooth as I push out. So we'll do it just from this view. So I'm pushing out and going down all the way down to there. Now I do not rotate my rib as I'm pushing down. I just go push down. I don't rotate the rib around at all. I just push down like that. So you can see that most of the pressure, you can see by how much clay is being collected, is happening by right here. And then I push down all the way down to the bottom here. And that base curve, right, it goes flat. I want that curve right here to match this curve right here. That's why I like this rib. So that curve there will match this rib. So I'm pushing down, 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 and I curl down right there. You see how that curve matches that rib? That's why I use this rib right here, because it matches the curve I want. If I had a slightly different curve rib, I'd end up making a slightly different curve bowl probably down there. So let's push it out again. Here we go, going down, 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 down. So once again, I'm pushing at my 3 o'clock here, okay? On the side of the clay, right, that's facing away. And so you can see how the bowl is slowly getting lower and lower, right? And this overhang is getting higher and higher. So as it's getting lower, it's getting wider. And that's what I want. I like that for this kind of bowl. That's what I like. And for me, since I did this decoration right on the outside, I want this bowl to be pretty straight, right? I could have flared this bowl out, right, and made this really wide bowl, but then you wouldn't be able to see this beautiful, be able to see the stamping design. So I like to keep these bowls with a vertical surface here. So that's the form that I'm going for. And I think that shows off all this texture, right? Because you buy these rollers and this thing. So one thing now that I need to work on is I have a little bit of a bump here. I'm going to take that bump and smooth it out by spending some time. You can see that I've been pushing it out, but I've been actually stopping short of my mark. So you see there's a little bit of a bump and then it goes down a little bit. So that a lot of people call that the beginner's bump. So I'm going to take care of that now because I'm almost done with my bowl. I'm going to take that and push that down. I'm going to use this part here and go from this way and into there like that, okay, to push that down. So here I'm focused on the inside. I want to push that down a little bit. I'm spending some time. I'm not pushing down hard. I'm just letting time and the wheel deal with it right there. I've got knocked off just a little bit of outer round. There we go. So then, of course, it's hard to see with your eyes. So sometimes I do this thing where I'll run my finger across because you can almost see better with your fingers, right? Because it's hard to see if that's what it was hard to see if that's what you want. So I'll run my finger. It's pretty close to what I want. So now I'll come back in here and compress the bottom because I haven't really done much of that. So this is the time when I really spend some time and I compress the bottom. Right? You see that how then all that clay comes up. I want to push it out just a little bit there. It's looking pretty good now. I'm not pushing too hard. I'm just letting time and the wheel turning kind of take care of all of this for me. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. So now I have this part looking good. It comes up into that. Ooh, that's feeling really good. I can feel it with my fingers. And then it comes up to verticalness. So now I'll switch back to the outside and just make sure that I have the form that I want. So let's lower this camera angle down and see if we can get it so that we will really see the form really well. So actually that's looking pretty good, right? So you see little changes make a lot of difference, right? About the form, right? And you notice that I haven't touched the outside at all. So every time I can only really push this outward. I don't really get to push this guy inward at all, right? So I started with a cylinder, I put the texture on, I've been slowly expanding this form out, right? To get this form that I want. So it's looking pretty good. So you see how it comes out and it has this beautiful belly comes up, it has this thing and it just goes in just a little bit. Maybe that's what we'll keep. Maybe that's what I want today is it comes out and has kind of a wideish point here and it makes a slight turn in. Ooh, that's looking good. Now you notice that I haven't really recovered my rim. My rim doesn't look flat or straight. You could leave that. So let's do two things. Let's make the rim twice. So what I'm going to do with this rim is I'm first just going to round it and see how it looks. Because sometimes these pots look great just as a bumpy, lumpy rim. And it kind of makes it look more organic. So let's just take this guy and wet that up, make that super wet. And let's just get a close-up look at what I'm going to do here with my rim. Okay, so you can see it's a little bit lumpy bumpy and that just came from the process of making it, right? So do we want that? I don't know. Let's just take my chamois here and just wrap it around with a little bit of pressure and let's see how it looks as a lumpy bumpy rib. So I'm thinking that looks okay as a lumpy bumpy rim, but now let's just cut it off just so we can see the difference, right? So I probably would leave it as a lumpy bumpy rim just in this case, but let's cut it off and let's see. So here I'm gonna cut my rim off here. So I'm gonna hold this like a pencil, my needle tool, right? See how I'm holding it like a pencil. I'll brace against my thumb here. I'm pushing up against my thumb and I use this finger as a guide on the inside. And I take this tip and I slowly drag it across the surface of the clay. So I slowly touch it and create a little furrow. And then each revolution, I stick it through just a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more, till I come out the other side. So now I'm cut through all the way there and I can lift that piece off super cleanly. So you got to do that super slow, right? So I cut it really close to the top. So that's why that top piece fell apart. I could scoop these chunks off. And then now let's just see how it looks, right? Let's see if we like this one better than the other one. So just no, I was fine with the way how the other one looks, but I know that oftentimes I do feel like it needs to get cut off. So now we're going to take my chamois thing. Let's wet it down a little bit more. Chamois thing, and let's chamois it up and let's just see how it looks now. All right, and then it's up to you guys. You guys can decide. Does it look better before? Should I have left it? Should I right? So there. So now that's how it looks now, right? And I think both work, right? I think you see how much tighter that rim is, right? You see that how it's much more of a rigid rim, and there's a little bit of cleanup I have to do here. So you see how this comes up and there's just a very slight turn inward. I could also just push this out just a little bit. Let's just do a few quick changes to this, just to talk about how important and how subtle the forms can be. So normally that would be it for me. I'd be done. I'm very happy with the shape, but let's just add just a little bit more belly here, and you'll see that the form changes a lot. Like how you feel about the pot and the energy of the pot will change a lot. So let's just use, I'm just going to use the fat part of this big rib and just push it out just a little bit right here. So I'll kind of be pointing to where I'm pushing out as I go down. So I just did it a little bit. So to me, I see a change. Let me just push here and push out a little bit more. Right, so you see how that changed the pot, in my opinion, a lot, meaning that is definitely, before it had a very subtle turn in where it's kind of like, is it my imagination? Is that turning back in? But now most definitely the widest part is here, and this is turning in a little bit, right? So it really depends on what you want to do. So let's do something else. So that is, this bowl has an energy, right? Where just by doing that, the energy of this bowl is really turning inward, right? I feel that energy coming in. So I always think of it about how, if you're like, if you have something like in your hand, right, like let's see here, like this, right, if your hands are open, right, and you're trying to give something to somebody, or if you're trying to hold something in, right, those things are slightly different energy, right? So this is the energy, right? This bowl is starting to close in just a little bit, so that gives us something different. Then let's try to widen it out a little bit and see how that changes it again. So I'll use this part of my rib again here and push it out just so we could see how the energy and how subtle changes make a big difference. So here, right, to me, that looks like a much, much different bowl, right? You see how the wide point is still here, but now it is kind of has a straight part that's angled inward, right? So instead of curling inward, it's kind of going straight up like that. That's okay too. So let's clean up the rim just a little bit now, because I messed it up because I was doing all that business, and then we'll clean it up with the chamois and we'll call this one done today. And then what we're going to do is we are going to get one out and we're going to trim. All right, so let's pull this guy off. Woohoo! Look at that. These plaster bats are awesome. So remember, I do not need to cut this off at all, the plaster bat. The thing that you do need to do with a plaster bat is undercut it. But you see how it's already undercut? Because I did that undercut long time ago, back before I used the roller stamp. So I am good to go with that. Okay, so let me set that aside. And let's look at how these pots look when they come off the, let's look at how they look when they come off the bat. So let's pull this up there and we'll have to fix. So when these come off the bat, look how they look. Wham! They are smooth. Right? That's because the plaster bat is smooth and I didn't have to use the wire. So a lot of people like using these plaster bats if they're not going to do any trimming and they want a smooth bottom. Look how smooth that bottom is. Right? It is a beautiful smooth bottom. So it's really nice, but I still got to trim this. So let's talk about that. So here we have this, and what we're eventually going to trim is something like that. You see, I drew out where the foot is going to be on this pot potentially, and that is one that's already been trimmed right there. You see that? So where do we want to locate the foot? In general, for me, with these sort of flat bottom bowls, I call it a flat bottom bowl because the bowl is flat and then it curves up, right? I like to put the foot directly across where the flat part ends, okay? You see that there, between there and there. So if we look at this here, right, you can see that the flat bottom part here ends right about there. That's where I put my foot, directly across from that flat bottom area. So how do we figure that out on one of these, right? So this is the bowl that we're going to trim. How do I figure that out? Well, I just put my finger on the inside where the flat bottom part is, and then I put my finger opposite, right? So there it is right there. I try to put my fingers on opposite each other from inside and outside. And then, so opposite where the flat, where I want my foot to be, right, on the inside. And then here I put it opposite on the outside. And then I just roll my finger down and use my fingernail and make a mark. That's where I want my foot to be, okay? So let's see here. So I need to take my bat system off here. And then let's just dry off my wheel. So normally I would take off my pins for this because I love trimming directly on the wheel. I just love that. I just love the feel of it. So, but normally I would take my pins off, but we're not going to do that today. So here I'm going to tap center this guy. I have a video on tap centering. So here, tap centering, almost there. There. So now it's tap centered. Then let me get out my trimming clay here. So I have these special blobs that I keep kind of wet to attach down. So 3 blobs here. You attach them to the side here like this, all the way around. Do, 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 do. There we go, all the way around. Do, 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 do. There, last one. Do, 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 do. All right, so now I know I have my fingernail mark right where I want that piece, where I want that to be, right? So let's get in close here, I guess. So I have my fingernail mark where I want that to be. So sometimes I'll just take this and draw a line like opposite that right there. So you see how that line goes through my fingernail mark. Sometimes I'll do this right here. And so that shows me where my foot is going to be here. You see that? That's this little band of round piece of clay that's the piece of clay I'm going to leave behind. And then the idea is for me to trim the inside and outside of this pot parallel so that the inside and outside of the walls are paralleling each other and have about the same thickness all the way around. Now, there's something funny going on here. You see that where it gets thinner here, but then thicker out here, and I'll explain why I'm doing that. But in generally, I want the inside and outside to parallel each other all the way around. You can see that, and so when the bowl is finished, it'll look kind of like that. So let's trim this up. So first of all, I'm going to start just by whacking off this clay here, because there's a big chunk of clay that I can trim off. So I generally will use this kind of Sureform tool. These Sureform tools are great. This one is from Mud Tools. They're awesome. And then you can see that these really trim off some clay really efficiently. If I can get this into position, there we go. Right, so this is really trimming off this wide chunk of clay right here. So what am I trimming off right now? I'm trimming off this part of the clay that's extra. You see that? That part right there. So let's keep trimming away. There we go. So this just allows, the reason why I love using these tools is because they're really easy to use. They're really stable when you're trimming. They don't like skitter around. They remove a lot of clay really fast too. They don't chatter. There's a bunch of reasons why you want these kind of like Sureform or this Michael Sherrill mud tool. These are great, by the way. So this is one, so I use that for a little bit. So normally I would just stick with one, but then here's another one that's similar. This one you can get at a hardware store. It's called a Sureform, S-U-R-F-O-R-M. There we go. So you can see that how that is coming off. So this one takes it off a little bit faster because this one is bigger and sharper, I think, because I need to change the blade on the other one that I was just using. So you see that I'm getting close to the line there, so I can't really trim any more off. I'll trim off just a little bit more with this. There we go. So that's looking pretty good. So I'm trimmed off most of that. Now I'm going to switch over to a regular trimming tool. So here I'll switch over to one of these guys here, and then what we're going to do is we're just get a different angle for you guys. So here I just go attack this using one of these square guys, and then I use this corner here, right here is my angle of attack. That's what how I really go after this tool. So here I'll trim this going this way like that, and I'm just going to trim right up to that line that I have already started there. You know, let's pull this back just a little bit so you guys have this. Let's go in right there like that. Ooh, yeah. So you guys have a really good view of that. That's awesome. All right, so here, now we'll just trim away. All right, look at that. So that's awesome, right? And so you see how this square end allows me to trim this vertical surface and this horizontal surface at the same time. So you see how that foot is starting to come out of the clay right there. Awesome. Trimming down, trimming down, trimming down. Looking good. So that's the side of my foot right there. Right, trim, trim, trim. When I feel like I think I got enough, I want to go down a little bit further. There we go. I'm feeling pretty good about that. So now I'm going to start trimming this part off right here. So here I'm going to turn this tool downward like that. I'm going to start trimming this part right here. So let's do a little bit of a change of view there. And I'm going to trim this part right here like this. Like that. So I'm going to start rounding this part off here. Like that. So this clay is in really good shape today for trimming. It's feeling really good. So now I'm starting to run into this part here, the texture. And so that's making my tool like bounce up and down as it hits the texture, the high points, it drops back down. So I just got to hold super steady. So you notice I'm putting my other hand up here, and that kind of helps dampen the bumpiness. There we go. So that's feeling really good. I'm trying to keep the bumpiness under control. Now it is creating kind of some bumpiness, but I'll show you what I'm going to do. So you see that I am starting to trim off some of my texture here. So what I'm going to do is I'm trying to keep as much of my texture as I can. So I'm trying not to trim too far down onto the vertical surface. So I'm trying to keep this angle here. You see how I started this angle here? I'm just going to keep that angle, I hope. Right, and then try to establish a pretty clean line with my trimming here. I'll show you what I mean. I have the example pot here. I can show you here in a second. So you see that how I'm starting to create this line. So I want a really clean line between texture and then where the part I trimmed off and where it's smooth. I don't want like this to be a really rough or crazy line. So here I'm just trying to create something that looks decent here, right, with the line there. There we go. Starting to get it. There, you might be able to hear the thumping. It's kind of thumping along because of the texture. But you see how that line is looking really nice and happy. So what's happening here? That's the reason why when I trim this, I trim this off like this. You see how I created that line, and then I go straight across because I'm trying to preserve as much of this vertical surface as I can, because I'm trying to preserve that texture that's on there. So I'm trying not to trim too much into the vertical stuff. So that's why I'm trimming kind of more like this at an angle, and then that ends up making some parts thinner than others. This part ends up thinner, and because I'm not trimming this round, this part right here ends up to be being thicker. So I'm trying to preserve as much of this the vertical surface as I can. So it's a little bit bumpy now because of the texture, because it keeps heating this texture and bumping my trimming tool up. So then I always try to come back with the Sureform, because the Sureform doesn't bump around as much with the texture. So I'm going to try to debumpify everything here with doing this, and this helps get rid of all those trimming bumps that the texture kind of forced me into having. So that's feeling much better, a little bit more. Yeah, so that's feeling good. And then I have to come back and do a little bit of trimming back with this tool to kind of make sure it's clean again, because I don't like the Sureform trimming mark. So if you look now, that texture is now gone there. Here we go. So now I'm going to trim out this inside part with a different tool. I always start that inside part. I could use this one today. So here I'll start trimming this inside part. I always start from the middle and go outward. There we go. Right there. So I'm there. I'm at the line. I don't want to go past that line, and I'll go again. There we go. Going out, 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 out. That's looking really good. Ooh, this clay is perfect. You see how it's coming off in these long, nice, beautiful ribbons? This clay is absolutely perfect for trimming right now. Keep going. So I got a few more rounds of that to go. Yeah. So now what's my goal here? Eventually what I want this to happen is for this level of this inside foot to match this level right there, so that it looks like it's the same thing going all the way across. So you see how this one here, right? This is out, and then I want this level to kind of match this level, this to come up, and so it looks like they could line up with each other. So this, I got to trim this part inside here down more to make that work. So here we go. We're going to trim down a little bit more here. Here we go. There. Nice. There we go. So, you know, so sometimes if you're a beginner, oops, you get worried that you're trimming maybe too much into your pot. right? So don't worry about that. You're doing okay usually, right? And so what? You trim a few pots through, that's okay. You can recycle the clay, it could live to be another day, right? So you want your bowls to look really good. So now that it's getting close, I'm gonna switch over to this tool here. So now it's getting close. And I did a little bit of a boo-boo. I trimmed a little bit into my foot, but I think I'm okay still. So here we go. I'm gonna start using this one here to trim this down so that the inside and outside of my feet kind of match here. So here we go, trimming around. There we go. Look at that. Nice. There we go. So now that's close. Like you see how that level and that level are starting to match up really nicely. So that means now I'm pretty much done with trimming this and this. So I'm going to clean up a little bit because if you look closely here, there's some trimming lines right here, right, that I'd love to get rid of. I want this to be a smooth surface. So now I'm not going to concentrate on removing material. I'm going to concentrate on getting rid of those trimming lines, right? So I want it to look good. So here we go. So here I'm going to use that tool. I'm just trying to use the flat part of this tool like that. And I'm not trying to take off a lot. I could also use the flat part of this tool too. So I could just do it this way as well. Because these are really trimmed really broadly. I'm not trying to take off a lot of clay. I'm just trying to clean it up. That's looking pretty good. So now the last thing that I need to do is round these corners off, right? So I want these corners to be like this. So you see how that's kind of nice and rounded, and I like the way to finish this a lot like the way how I finish my rim, right? You see how my rim is nice and rounded? I want this foot to be nice and rounded. One of the reasons for that is when I set this down, like you're going to set these down on hard counters and stuff, right? Always one side is going to hit before the other, okay? If it's rounded, it has less chance of chipping, right, when it hits. If the pot is really square, like the way how this edge, my cut edge is, you see how that, when it hits the edge, that square edge can break off. So I like having these nice rounded feet. And I think about it like I like to start my rims kind of nice and rounded, and I like to finish my feet in the same way, nice and rounded. So here we're going to trim that. We're going to trim this into round here by using this, and I'm going to trim off this corner and trim off that corner. There we go. Trimming off, and then trimming off over here, trimming off. There we go. So there, and I don't trim anything off of there. So if we look close, you can see hopefully that it's looking pretty round. And then what I'm going to do is I'll take a metal, or not a metal, this one of these rubber ribs, and just kind of use this to kind of help smooth it out to make sure it's all happy and beautiful. There we go. Maybe use a little bit of finger action. I don't want it to look trimmed. So there, so you see how that pot is starting to look really good, right? This level coming across here looks like it matches up. When it comes out of the foot, the bottom, it looks like this surface, and then this surface kind of will match up. So let's flip it over and take a look and just make sure everything looks okay, right? Everything's smooth and happy, right? Let's flip it over. Ooh, and then you can kind of feel the weight. The weight feels pretty good right now, right? It feels good. The weight feels really good. And the last finishing touch is to add my chop, which is right here. And for these ones lately, I've been stamping it right here on the outside of the foot. I have my hand on the inside pushing back exactly opposite of where this chop is going to go. There, so there's my chop. Take a look. Woohoo! There she is. Yeah. All right, everyone. Thanks a lot. I hope you enjoyed.